Hello friends, welcome to today's video. I'm in front of my bike, I'm wearing the Peloton shirt, I'm going to be doing another Peloton video. And for today's video, I'm going to be talking about my week of riding with Bradley Rose. If you've never seen one of these videos before, basically when I first got my Peloton, I found I was going back to the same instructors over and over. I really liked Tunde, I really liked Cody, I did some stuff with Ali, and I wasn't really branching out. So I decided to choose different instructors and ride with them for at least a week. Sometimes I've done a bit more, and also try some of their other offerings, whether it's strength or I've tried a couple of like running and walking things, just to basically get a sense of those instructors. And I've been doing this for a number of instructors now, so I will link the my Peloton playlist down below. But I have reviewed Sam Yo, Jen Sherman, Leanne Hainsby, Robin Arzon, and now I'm going to be talking about Bradley Rose. I have also done videos on my first 30 days of owning my Peloton, on completing the Total Strength program, and also on the sleep meditation program. So all of those will be linked down below. Since Bradley is a relatively new instructor, I thought it would be interesting to try out his rides for a while. And I didn't do a lot of like background looking into him, but from his rides and what he talks about, he sort of came up a little bit being a boxer. That's like a good part of his athletic background. He is from England, but he lived in America for a while. I think he was trying to make it as an actor. He mentioned being in like one Hallmark Christmas movie. I initially had a thought of like, maybe I'll try to find that and watch it as part of my week with him, but I didn't. I'm not a Hallmark movie person. And he did come back to the UK, and he is now part of the London crew. In these reviews, I tend to break it down to 3 categories just to make it a little more structured, and that is the workouts, their style, and their personal fit with me. And that last one is where I sort of offer my personal opinion. So let's talk first about his workouts. His workouts are pretty straightforward. It's basically just on the bike. He also has 2 stretching classes, like 5-minute post-ride stretches, and he has a handful, I think about 5 at this point, of strength classes, but they are all the arm toning classes that are still done while sitting on the bike. If instructors have beginner or advanced beginner workouts, I tend to start with those as I go into the week. Bradley doesn't have any of those. So in these classes, I did a mix of his theme rides. He had like some 80s and 90s rides and a Britpop ride. I did some of his low impact classes. I did some of his cool down classes. And yeah, I think that kind of covers it. I also took his very first premier ride. Now I know there's other classes in there like HIIT classes and climb classes. I'm still not necessarily up to the level of doing those. So those were the classes that I did. In his workouts, I did notice a little bit of a pattern. He does tend to do a warm up and then speed intervals. And then towards the end of his workout, he tends to also do speed intervals or maybe like a jog and then a speed interval. But he tends to like to start and end with those. And if you are interested in doing any of his cool down rides, I tend to like to do 5 or 10 minute cool down rides after the rides that I do. It's pretty straightforward with him. From the ones that I've done, he never comes out of the saddle for them. You basically start out higher resistance, lower cadence, and then lower the resistance and increase the cadence throughout the time of the cool down ride. Now let's talk a little bit about his style. And in here I put structure, because one of the things that I have noticed is that it's important for me to understand what the structure of a ride is going to be, what I'm in for. I really like it when they give you that sort of map of what you're going to do. And there are some people who do a lot of structure and some people who do very little. So for example, Leanne Hainsby will say like almost like you have 30 pushes through this entire ride and this is how they're all broken down. And then some other folks like Jen, I've noticed sometimes just don't even sort of give you that roadmap at any point at the beginning. Bradley kind of falls in the middle. So what he will do is at the beginning of the ride say, here's our roadmap for the day. We're gonna warm up, then we're gonna do a speed interval, a light climb, a heavy climb, you know, a rest, then a jog or something heavy at the end to end us out. And then as he goes into each song, because those sort of breakdowns tend to happen by song, he will give you more explanation in that moment. So if you're doing speed intervals, he'll say, okay, we're gonna do speed intervals from like 105 to 120 cadence, and we're gonna do like 2 20-second and then 1 45-second. So you kind of have an idea if you go through. So for me, that was enough structure to feel comfortable in the ride. I will also mention that if you are somewhat of a beginner rider, his low impact rides I found to be very easy. There are some folks who do, some instructors who do low impact rides, and although you never come out of the saddle, you still get like a good sweat in it. They push you pretty hard. I did find that his low impact rides tended to be fairly easy and might be good if you're more of a beginner rider who's still trying to build up some of that strength and endurance on the bike. I also noticed in terms of the kind of workouts that he structures on the bike, he really does tend towards intervals. So even when, for example, he's doing a heavy climb, while some instructors might get you to set it to like 45 or higher, I tend towards the lower end of the resistance range. And then they'll keep building you up and up, so it's sort of a sustained climb. Bradley will more often say, okay, for a heavy climb, we're gonna start at a minimum of 45 up to like 60, and then he will do intervals within that up to like 50, and above. So even though he's doing a heavy climb and you are in that climb mode the whole time, it's still intervals within that. He also does seem to favor doing jogs, which not all instructors do. Like, I don't feel like Robin does jogs very often, but he seems pretty good at coaching you in those jogs and how you sort of like get your body. So I really did feel like this week in Bradley's workouts was the first time that I felt I was successfully doing a jog. Usually when I'm out of the saddle, I'm really sort of like pushing down and my legs are doing a lot of work. This was the first time I really felt like I was in a jog. I was holding my body steady and really like moving my legs like up and down, almost like my core was doing more of the work and I was pulling my legs up towards me rather than really feel like I was stomping a lot of the time. Hopefully that makes sense. It's very tiring to do, but I did feel like I was getting into that groove a little bit more. And in terms of his style as well, he uses the word sometimes like cheeky, and I feel like that describes him really well. He has a very cheeky kind of attitude. There's a lot of like wink and nudge kind of stuff going on. He's very bubbly and almost flirty. Like, I feel like he knows that he is like a good looking man, and there's a lot of women who are taking the rides because like sometimes when he goes to like his side camera, there's a little bit of like a wink and a nod. And if you like being called, beautiful, and him telling you he loves you from like a very attractive British man, that's the kind of thing that he does. He has a lot of cute words, like he talks about like clickety clacking into the cleats. He uses words like scrumdiddlyumptious. He's just got this little bit of a wink and a nod. He's the only person I've heard who kind of made a bit of an innuendo about reaching down for the knob on the bike. So he does have that kind of like cheeky attitude. This is Editing Melissa here. As I was editing this video, I read a comment online that said that Bradley Rose basically sounds like the 10th Doctor from Doctor Who and acts a lot like him too, and that could not be more accurate. So if you are a fan of David Tennant's Doctor Who, riding with Bradley will feel like you are riding with the Doctor. By the way, I apologize if my lighting is all over the place. There's a lot of clouds today, so the sun's going in and out. The final thing I will mention about style has to do with the arm toning class. And I only took one of his arm toning classes, but he did make a reference to strength training, doing like simple exercises done well. And I did find that. It was a pretty straightforward class. He did one arm at a time, and it was basically like bicep curls, shoulder presses, tricep exercises, and then rows. And then the same thing on the other side, and then ending out with like some boxing drills. So it wasn't a whole bunch of fancy stuff. It was very straightforward, and then sustaining those different movements for like 45 seconds at a time. So let's talk about my final category, which is personal fit. And I'm finding more and more as I go through these different instructors, there's a couple of things that make a difference to me. One of them, as I mentioned before, is the structure, like how well they let you know what you're going to be doing through the ride. But the other thing for me is music makes a huge difference. If I like the kind of music that they're using, I mean, I am so much more into a ride. It's part of why I love Robin so much, is I feel like I have very similar musical tastes. I really like stuff from like the 90s, from the 80s, and you know what? Bradley does the same. So I really enjoy his musical taste. So I did some 90s rides, I did some 80s rides, I did a Britpop ride. I also noticed he had things like pop punk rides, which is also in sort of the genre of what I like. Interestingly, this wasn't necessarily for me, but he also has classical music rides, which I think is kind of an interesting area to get into. There are some people that might super jive with, but I think one of the reasons I really enjoy Bradley is I jive with his musical taste. His style of motivation tends to be all about being on the bike. And when I say that, I mean that there are some others like Robin, who I super love, where it's a lot of like, I want to say self-development kind of motivation, talking about like being a queen and like showing up for yourself. And his motivation tends to be like saying things to you to keep you motivated to like get to the end of like this hard interval. Like, yes, it's gonna hurt, but like keep going, we're almost there, you know, like you wanna be able to fly at the end of this. And that's the kind of hype up that he does. And he also dances a lot on the bike. And I have to say, I like that. It makes it feel a little bit more, especially because it's the kind of music that I really like, that you're like dancing with someone and he seems like he's genuinely having a good time dancing. And he's one of those people where, it doesn't seem like he's self-conscious at all. He is like totally putting everything into it, and he doesn't sing along, but he like mouths along with the music. And I really like that. I really do like his positioning cues. I find that he uses some that other people haven't used that I think have helped me. So, you know, he talks about like bum back in the seat and like knees and toes tracking forward, but some of his cues about like lengthening your spine and like keeping yourself upright have really helped me. And I think that's also why I was able to do some of the jog that I had not previously been able to do. He's also really silly in ways that are disarming and also distracting, and distracting in a good way in terms of like keeping your mind off of like your body that might be hurting. So he's very self-depreciating and talking about his dancing. What are some things that made me laugh? He jokes about naming his bike Pegasus and talking about it like it's a horse, which I find distracting and just very cute. And there was a part at the end of one workout, I think it might have been like a cool down, where, you know, he was talking about like showing up for yourself, all that sort of self-motivating stuff that is sort of talked about, and like believing in yourself. And he's like, you know, you should believe in yourself. I forget exactly what led into this because I feel like I wasn't 100% paying attention. Or he's like, you know, you're enough or something like that. And he's like, and if anybody tells you that you're not enough, you know, I will come at them. I know jujitsu, and did like all these funny like pretend jujitsu things. Anyway, it was just totally disarming and threw me off and legitimately made me laugh. And he'll sort of talk about things in a way that makes you, as I said, forget about what you're doing, but in a good way. You know, he talks about doing speed intervals and being like a duck, and, you know, your little feet going under the water while your body stays, you know, still. And then when I was doing like the shoulder presses, he was talking about, yeah, get your arm all the way up. He goes, pretend like you're feeding a giraffe. And it was like, how does this come to your mind? I appreciate it, but I don't know how you think of these things. There are a couple things I would offer as criticism, and they're just tiny little things. He tells some stories sometimes on the bike that feel a little disjointed, like they come out of nowhere. And I get it, like I think it's good to like tell stories, but you know, I know they script all these things ahead of time, or at least they should be. And I feel like there's space for him to sort of like think about the stories he's going to tell in a way that connects into like the music or the theme of the ride. And I think Robin does this really well. She'll tell stories from like her youth and stuff like that when she's doing like 80s and 90s rides, because the music reminds her of stuff. And it becomes like a story and a personal thing that kind of makes sense in conversation because it's not coming out of nowhere. Bradley at one point just started talking about like Bridgerton and his wife, and it felt a little disjointed. And the last thing, and this is so petty, but I don't care, I could go the rest of my life without hearing the phrase creamy calf ever again. I don't know why he refers to calf muscles as creamy, but to me that's like worse than hearing the word moist. Like, ugh. I don't want to hear the word creamy applied to any of my muscles. I don't like that. Maybe that's just me. Stupid little criticism, but like, oh my goodness, I don't like it. So I thought the final two things I would do in this video is give you some recommendations of a couple of his rides that I really liked. And then I will put him in my order of like ranking my favorite instructors. So the two rides that I really liked, one of them was his 90s rock ride. I'm a person who was like a high schooler, in the 90s. So, you know, you give me like Foo Fighters and the Cranberries and Nirvana, and I'm all over that. So in his 90s rock ride, he had Zombie by the Cranberries, he had Everlong. I mean, Smells Like Teen Spirit was like the big finisher in that one, and I just loved it. I was so hyped up in that ride. I was also someone who, especially in like my first year or so of university, was super into Britpop. So a little bit Oasis, but like Blur and Pulp and some of those bands I really liked. So he has on here a Britpop ride. It's actually his latest one, his first one in their new UK studio. And I really liked it. It had like some songs in it I really loved. I will say though, it's the one ride of his that I did where he forgot to give you the roadmap at the start of it. So just in case you're interested in this ride, I did write down what the roadmap was. He started with a warm-up, he did speed intervals, there may have been a jog in there, I'm kind of forgetting. Light climb, heavy climb, then a recovery, then a jog, and then a speed interval to end it up. And I will say, again, if you decide to do this Britpop ride, the very last speed interval, the resistance isn't listed properly on the screen. It should be, I think, 20 to 40, and they have it at like 40 to 50. I don't know how often they will go back and like double check things or fix things, but just in case you're interested in doing it, there's just a little bit of a warning from me. So in terms of ranking the instructors that I have ridden with so far, I think Robin is still my favorite. I love her style, I love her musical taste, I love her motivational aspects. I do find myself going back to her, especially if I'm doing any kind of like walking or running outside. So she's my favorite. I find Sam and Bradley are really tied in the next spot, and I feel like it depends on what you're in the mood for. Sam is much more chill, whereas Bradley is like that cheeky, high energy, dancing kind of thing. I feel like Bradley may get a bit of an edge just because I feel like I jive a little bit more with some of his music, but to me they're very similar. And then Leanne we have there, and then Jen after that. So I find that I don't tend to go back to Jen rides at all. I will maybe do a Leanne ride if it really strikes me. She has a Spice Girls ride that I really want to do, but I do find that I keep going back to Robin, and I will do some of Sam's rides, and I was excited all of this week for doing Bradley's rides. So that is it for this review. I hope you guys liked it. Please, if you liked it, hit that thumbs up. That really helps out my video. Subscribe to my channel if you haven't subscribed and you want to see more of these reviews. And also, please leave a comment. I would love to hear about who you would like me to review next. And if you do leave me a comment about who you'd like me to review next, please let me know, if possible, some of your favorite rides that they do. I would really appreciate it. Thank you so much for joining me, and I look forward to seeing you in my next video. Bye!